Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we have our usual roundup of stories affecting the Sikh community around the world. And in an explosive accusation, evidence is emerging that the government of India tried to hire a hitman through one of its Canadian embassies to murder a colleague of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Of course, sitting in context of a similar Indian government assassination plot in the United States, uncovered by the FBI. And in the UK, a row breaks out in the Sikh community as a familiar Hindutva supporting British Conservative MP is welcome to join the community at the Guru Nanak Dev Ji's Gurpurab in the Houses of Parliament. All that and more on today's show, but joining me as always is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. Today we are looking at some interesting stories from around the world. But one that's really special that you want to check out is how Sikhs for Justice is calling for the U.S. government in a letter to Donald Trump to shut down the U.S. border to immigration from India. Well, stick around for that story, and don't forget that, of course, we'll be covering your comments at the end of the show. We are getting closer and closer to going live, so just practice your typing skills before your telephone skills, because you'll be able to call in and talk with us when we go live in January. So we're excited. We hope you are as well. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed. And in the meantime, James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community around the world. And as usual, we'll take a look at loads of great comments, which will be filling up below the videos at the end of the show. So do stay tuned for that. But away we go, James. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
We are starting off with a story. Well, I guess we're continuing on with the story, technically. We reported last year that there was a CBSA senior supervisor who had been targeted by the Hindutva media. They had actually doxed this border security employee and put his home address on the internet, as well as a map to his location, where, of course, he and his family resided. They went even further, someone posting online to kill him, and again, showed the address and the map, the aerial map of his house. Now, this has been a big problem for this CBSA officer, as he had nothing to do with India. He was born in Canada. He is an employee of the Canadian Border Services Agency for decades, and his family is also very involved in whether it's philanthropy or government service and so much more, that he was just shocked when it came out that India in the media and the Hindutva were labeling him as a terrorist. They went even further by publishing his name, his address, all of this information, and labeling him a terrorist in the India media, which then, of course, hit the Canadian media. This triggered an investigation by the Canadian Border Services Agency, who brought in the Canadian Security Intelligence Service to investigate and find out what was going on. They, of course, found after, I believe it was about 9-month investigation, that there was absolutely no credibility that this officer had done anything remotely wrong. He had absolutely nothing to do with any type of terrorism, any type of separation, anything at all. He barely is, practicing his religion, but he is of Sikh ancestry or faith. And he also had gone to India for a wedding. When he filed for his visa to travel to India, that is the photo that they actually took and used against him in the press releases, showing his photo from that visa application. Now, of course, this caused not only stress on his professional life, but also resulted in all of these questions coming from his colleagues and others saying, well, we thought we knew him. What's going on here? And although it was proven to be completely fabricated, it had a devastating impact on his life. Now, if you take into account even further that he had to worry day and night about the safety of his children, the safety of his family, that really takes a toll on an individual, especially when you're being targeted by a very powerful and historically successful country that does take action when it comes to transnational repression and foreign interference. Now, it appears that they targeted him just because of the fact that he was in what they considered a high-profile position, being the face of Canada at the border, and because he had a Sikh last name. However, with that said, of course, he even came out and said that Sidhu is like the equivalent of Smith in the Western world. It is a very common last name. He has absolutely nothing to do with the individual that they were naming or insinuating he was, or they just blatantly outright didn't care and used him because he was that Canadian employee of the government that they could use in their media war. And that was in response to, of course, being called out on their involvement in the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, as well as other cases in Canada, the US, and in Europe or in the UK. Now, this is now turned into a $9 million lawsuit. He has launched a lawsuit against the government of India for their actions in targeting him in the media and trying to discredit him, as well as putting his family in such a precarious state of insecurity. With that said, he has also named the Canadian government in stating that they failed to protect him. The Canadian government failed to provide much service to not only protect him and his family, but also to deal with the issue on an official capacity, which they had the grounds to do with India directly. Instead, they said that it was not an employment-related issue. However, I beg to differ that because he was targeted specifically because of his place of employment, because of his position. And if the government of Canada fails to see the connection there, then I have real concerns about our security services, about our RCMP, and about the government. If you're not going to stand up and protect the employees who risk their health, safety, and lives at the borders every day, then why are they doing it? Why is our government not standing up for Canadian citizens, especially those who are giving back to society and protecting our borders? By ignoring this, they left him out on a ledge with absolutely no safeguards whatsoever. And even worse, they left his family out on that ledge with him. Now, of course, that lawsuit has been launched in the Ontario courts, and we'll have to follow it to see how it progresses. It is a very difficult move to sue a foreign government because of different liability coverages and waivers, but we'll wait and see how this plays out because it was such a direct and intentional infliction of defamation against this border services agent, and it turned his life upside down. And to this day, of course, he still has to be concerned about his and his family's safety. I think that it's very brave of him to take this step. I give him credit for that. I respect his service to our nation, trying to keep our borders safe. And most of all, I wish him and his family a very safe holiday season and much success with this lawsuit because it has much far-reaching implications. If the Indian government and their BJP and Hindutva ministers and politicians can be held to account for their actions through their media propaganda machine, which is extensive, then that will help others in the future as well. And it'll help to prevent people from being in the same position as the Sidhu family. So again, a big story breaking here in Canada. And if you want more on this and a bit of the background, go to globalnews.ca. They have a great coverage of this, as well as what the India press is reporting as well. So again, globalnews.ca, and you can find out more about that story. It's very interesting, but one of great significance here in Canada. As we move forward, another issue here in Canada of a murder. Now, this one does not involve the Sikh community directly, but it does have implications. This was actually a very long and drawn-out court process that took about almost 9 years to resolve. The individual, Kane Carter, was accused of killing Alfred Wong as well as a rival gang member, and this was going back to 2018, I believe. What happened is that Alfred Wong was actually a 15-year-old youth. He had just finished dinner with his parents. They were on their way home from the restaurant. They were driving down Broadway, which is a main street in Vancouver, goes from east to west. And as they were driving, this individual, Kane Carter, as well as Mr. Whitehead, his rival, were shooting at each other. This was a gang war that had taken to the streets, and they were just insignificantly or, just randomly firing at each other with absolutely no caution or care about the public that was out on the streets, in the vehicles, and their safety. One of the bullets did pass through the Wong family vehicle and struck Alfred Wong. He was later pronounced dead, and that was just the beginning of the nightmare for the families. If it doesn't get worse than that, the justice system was slow in its prosecution, and it wasn't a problem with the justice system per se. It was just the way that the investigation took extensive time, and then all of the delays in the court process. But then the jury was undecided, so it came back as a hung jury, and it had to go back to trial again. So again, it wasn't necessarily the investigation or the prosecution. It was just the culmination of all of these factors that caused the delay in this case to reach its final conclusion. Now, at this time, of course, the Vancouver Police, the prosecution office, and most importantly, the Wong family are finally seeing some relief and some justice served. The individual, Kane Carter, has been found guilty of both the second-degree murder of this young Wong youth, as well as the counterpart or the rival gang member that he had been originally shooting at. So once again, we send our best wishes to Alfred Wong's family. We understand how difficult this process is, having gone through it personally with family members. So again, it is a long, arduous, stressful, and emotional process that has finally come to an end here in Canada. So again, thank you to the Vancouver Police Department, all of the other agencies that were involved, and of course the prosecutor's office or the Crown prosecution for taking this case as far as you did to ensure that justice was served on behalf of the Wong family. This is just another case of the gang battle that's taking to the streets in Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley. Whether it's the Bishnoi gang, whether it's the Red Scorpions or the United Nations or the many other gangs that are out there, it is a scourge on our streets that needs to be stopped. And now that we are seeing all of these resources being poured into the gang, the investigations and the specialized task forces to target the gangs, hopefully cases like this will become fewer and far between. But it just highlights the random indiscriminate shooting that takes place by these gangsters, and they don't care who gets hurt in the crossfire. In this case, it was an innocent young Alfred Wong who paid the price. We're moving on now to Washington, where Sikhs for Justice has issued a letter to President Donald Trump. This is challenging Donald Trump, or actually requesting of him that he ban Indian nationals except for Sikhs. Now, they go on to state that India is a known source of fraudulent visas, fraudulent passports, fraudulent ID, and visa applications, as well as running H-1B scams. They also say that they deprive Americans of jobs and take from the economy. Further to that, they also highlight a very specific point that the India pharmaceutical companies, as well as individuals and other corporations, are involved in exporting fentanyl precursor items to the United States en masse. So again, they say that they are defying the U.S.'s policy on the drug problem, and they are challenging the U.S. government to include India for the sake of banning them in terms of coming into the U.S., saying all except for persecuted Sikhs are banned from crossing into the U.S. at this time. This is, of course, something that they say the Sikhs are facing an existential threat and religious and political prosecution. So therefore, they are once again asking for that movement on the U.S. side. With that said, of course, they also say that the situation is not only about the fentanyl precursors, but as I stated earlier or touched on, the American First agenda. That the Indian nationals are used as cheap H-1B labor, and they take those jobs from American citizens, and they are including that within the overall complaint. They also say that U.S. based infrastructure and training programs are impacted by Build India's tech workforce by training and offering experience in the U.S. before they return these employees to India to further benefit the growth and development of their tech sector. They also claim that the wages in many cases are being depressed by the fact that they are bringing in H-1B workers because they can for a lack of better terms, they screw these foreign workers out of their wages and out of money that they're entitled to. Therefore, they push the rates down for the job market and the overall marketplace, creating less money that's being paid out to American workers as well. So it has that spillover impact. With that said, they also claim that there's also the concern, of course, that there are dodging of taxes and loopholes that create an incentivized system to bring in foreign workers as opposed to hiring U.S. workers at livable wages. So they also turn and look at the criminal indictments in the federal court and bring that up about the large-scale H-1B visa fraud. And they're saying that they are using shell companies to file fraudulent petitions. They've brought workers into the U.S. under false pretenses. They have violated labor relations laws and exploited U.S. programs. So again, huge accusations by Sikhs for Justice in trying to get their further action against India for their targeting of the Sikh community and for their involvement in the fentanyl drug trade and the multiple countries that are already being limited and restricted travel-wise to the U.S. for these accusations that they're saying apply also to India. So once again, just to wrap that up, they have stated further that under Modi's Hindutva regime, Sikhs are persecuted for their religion, khalistan political opinion is treated as a crime, Sikh activists face sedition cases, the UAPA charges, and police torture. They further go on to say that Sikh leaders have been assaulted or targeted in Canada, the US, and Europe, and close out by saying that Indian agencies run surveillance and hit operations in the USA against American Sikhs. So a big letter and a lot of accusations that, of course, this was just filed yesterday and delivered to President Trump. Now we'll wait and see what his response is, and we'll see what India's response is. Essentially, they are, once again, just adding India to be added to the restricted countries list, and that would, they claim, protect Americans from the fentanyl epidemic being enabled by Modi's India, and many other points. So again, if you pause the screen and want to read through that, you're more than welcome to, but in the interest of time, we'll leave it there for you to review on your own in further detail. With that, Angus, it is big accusations against Modi, against India, and now we got to wait and see how the Trump administration responds.
Yes, interesting. I think. I mean, when I first sort of heard this, I thought, nice try, Mr. Panetta, but it's most unlikely. But actually, if you read the letter, and it's a very well written letter, and it's a very well argued letter. Actually, it does start to make sense, because he does talk about all the issues that are very, very important to Donald Trump, and certainly the issues that shape his international policy and his domestic policy. He does talk about, well, we do know, for example, the fentanyl precursors that are coming into the United States, a lot of them are coming through from India. And indeed, there is a current legal case underway where Indian industrialists are now being charged in the US for this very crime. So again, it's not baseless. These are not just baseless accusations. They are genuine accusations backed up by real events. So again, that is one issue that is in and of itself enough to argue this whole case. There's the case about the crime. We often talk about the organised crime being exported from India into the United States. He talks about the whole cheap labour argument. Yes, of course, we do know Silicon Valley employs an awful lot of Indian workers. the tech industry, but it's not just the tech industry, it's the low-paid industries as well that, again, is pushing American or indigenous Americans out of work because they're importing cheap labour. So again, another argument. And then another argument he alludes to as well is that India's interference in United States domestic policy, in its politics, in its law enforcement, etc. We do know that Hindutva are infiltrating and manipulating and influencing policy decisions. For example, in California, SB 509, as we talked about regularly, which is a clear indication that India's pressure is actually influencing the politics of America. And surely Donald Trump cannot like this. So again, it does actually stack up. The whole argument, the arguments that he lists do actually make sense, which now in reality, is Donald Trump going to ban India? I think it's very unlikely because there are too many. He obviously has a lot of stakeholders involved in this. He's got to weigh up all the pros and cons. India, he does need to keep on side. Whatever India's crimes, even on American soil, at the end of the day, Donald Trump needs India on side. If he bans Indians from coming into the United States, he's going to push India further into the arms of Russia and China. That is something he doesn't want to do. So I think it's unlikely. And then, of course, he's also a businessman, and he still sees India as a massive potential trading market, a commercial market that, again, he does not want to alienate. So again, I think on balance, it's unlikely this will happen. But I have to say, full marks to Gurpurab Singh Panoom, because, as I say, he does put up a very, very convincing case on this. So good luck to him on that. I want to jump back to your first story, Sandeep Singh Sidhu. I think you're right, James. I think this story is extremely significant. And it's more significant than at first sight because, of course, it's unlikely. This gentleman, this border officer who's taken the Indian and the Canadian governments to court, in reality, it's unlikely anything's going to happen with India. It's more symbolic, the fact that he's taken the Indian government to court. Now, the question is, where is he taking them to court? Is it in Canada? Is it in India? I guess it's in Canada. But unlikely, even whatever the court decides, even whether compensation or whatever, it's unlikely that there's going to be any recompense or anything. As I say, that element is more symbolic. It's just highlighting to the world, this is what India have been up to, and they will be found guilty of X, Y, Z. What does matter, though, and I think what is really significant here, and this is a real lesson to all of us across the West, and particularly Western democracies, is he's taken the Canadian government to court. And this is what really matters, because what he's doing, he's holding the Canadian government's feet to the fire. He is saying, look, if you can't protect me, if you are not standing up for our own citizens, if you are not yourselves holding India to account, I can't do it, but you should be able to do it, then I will keep taking you to court because you have a duty as a government to protect me as certainly one of your employees. And the point is, it's not just a citizen, he's an employee, or I don't know if he still is, but he certainly was an employee of the Canadian government. So what he's doing, he's using lawfare. This is a great word, this lawfare. He is attacking India indirectly through the Canadian government by weaponising the law. So right, Canadian government, it's up to you to be taking on. I can't take on India, but you should be. You should be taking on India. And I am going to keep taking you to court, and I'm going to keep punishing you, both publicly in terms of your reputation and legally, financially, whatever. I'm going to keep attacking you through weaponising the law until you start acting on our behalf. And this really is a lesson to all of us, because the whole community needs to use lawfare to attack our own governments to hold their feet to the fire, because the British government is not taking India to task. The US government is to some degree. The Canadian government has in the past via Trudeau, but Carney certainly isn't. And as we often say, politicians will always take the path of least resistance. They are open to pressure. In other words, if you pressure a government enough, if you pressure a politician enough, they will bend. It's as simple as that. The bigger the pressure, the more likely they are to bend. So by weaponising the law, by keep undertaking lawsuits like this, it applies huge amounts of pressure to a government who eventually will say, we're being taken to court again. This is really hurting us. It's damaging our reputation. We need to do something about it. And that's the key. We need to do something about it. So law cases like this actually apply that pressure to force them to do something about it. So, James, to me, that is a significant part of that. As I say, it's just a small, simple court case, but it's bigger than that. It is actually, it's using lawfare to apply pressure on the government to do something about it. Because, as I say, we know that it's ineffective against India, but it's the Canadian government, it's the Carney government who are going to have to wake up and say, and particularly if they lose this case, they're going to have no choice but to do something about it. And that's the key there, James.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that he names them as essentially co-defendants, because this means that even if India fails to respond or to attend court, the Canadian government is still obligated to do so. So at the end of the day, it still could set a precedence if the judgment is given in absentia of the India government and essentially against the government of Canada. They also, of course, would be jointly responsible for that payment. If India fails to make the payment, the Canadian government, in de facto as the co-defendant, would still be on the hook. And to me personally, ladies and gentlemen, don't get too excited, because I have a feeling that this will be settled out of court. And as far as the government can issue an NDA, I do believe that it will be settled with a non-disclosure agreement, therefore keeping the precedents and the media circus surrounding this case very quiet and quelled, because it has such major implications.
Indeed. And again, this is a lesson that you learn the older you get, is that the establishment always protects the establishment. And unfortunately, the law courts, etc., they are all part of the establishment. And it's like public inquiries. Never in the history of public inquiries, certainly here in the UK, and I'm sure it'll be the case in North America, never in the history of a public inquiry has the public inquiry found against the government. In other words, the establishment are policing the establishment. So unsurprisingly, these inquiries never actually find the guilty. That's a sad fact of life. All we can do is just keep pressuring and hope, and certainly in this case, hope something positive comes out of it and pushes the kind of government in the right direction on that one. Now, talking of which, James, I'm going to move on to Mr. Gurpurab Singh Panoon, because likewise he has been busy. He's been a very busy chap, Mr. Panoon. He really does not let his foot off the gas, as they say. He's really going for it now. And staying in Canada, is that it is a bit of an explosive allegation that he's come out with. Now, that he's provided no actual evidence for this, but it is a huge accusation, and in the context of everything that we know, it is actually quite likely to be true. What he said, he's revealed that the Canadian security and intelligence agencies are aware of a plot, a contract to kill plot, as he calls it, by diplomats of the Indian High Commission in Ottawa to target one of the referendum organisers, a chap called Inderjit Singh Gosal. He's a colleague of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. And of course, this does reflect the incident, the murder of Shahid Hardeep Singh Nijjar a couple of years ago. Now, what he's claiming is that a serving Indian diplomat in Ottawa attempted to hire a hitman for $50,000. It doesn't make it clear if that's US or Canadian dollars. It's immaterial. But with $50,000, tried to hire this guy to kill Gosal, who, as we know, is a key organiser of the referendum. Now, we also know that Gosal has been offered witness protection by the RCMP, owing, of course, to imminent threats to his life. And again, it reflects many Khalistani campaigners who've also been offered witness protection and been warned about these threats to life. And he said, look, and Panoon has said, look, this is what he knows. He has been advised that this is the truth. And it does, of course, sit in the context of all the other attempted assassinations and real assassinations of other pro-Khalistan Sikhs on Canadian soil. I'm going to play you, this is the video of Panoon in his usual sort of quite robust manner. This is him talking about it, and then we'll talk about it in a moment.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Today, Sikhs for Justice and Pro-Khalistan Sikhs burnt the effigy of India's High Commissioner Dinesh Patnaik, the face of India's Hindutva terrorism in Canada. I am forced to share this information with the Canadians. Canadian agencies already know that Indian officials from Ottawa Indian High Commission tried to hire a hitman, offered $50,000 to assassinate Inderjit Singh Gosal, a close associate of Shahid Hardeep Singh Nijjar and the organizer of Khalistan referendum in Canada. I am forced to share this information to preempt and to prevent another assassination on Canadian soil. And I'm very sure through Canadian agencies, Prime Minister Carney's office, Foreign Minister Nityanand's office, and Public Safety Minister's office have this information that Narendra Modi's government is still planning to assassinate pro-Khalistan Sikhs on Canadian soil. I urge all Canadians, tail Dinesh Patnaik, shadow Dinesh Patnaik, follow Dinesh Patnaik from residence to his office in Ottawa, force, push and pressure Dinesh Patnaik to leave Canada before another assassination takes place in Canada. Dinesh Patnaik is face of the extortion ring that is operating from Ontario to British Columbia. But the government of Canada wants to bury the crimes of the Indian government under the trade deals. The outcome is going to be violence by the Indian agents again on the Canadian soil, and I can assure you the only way to stop is to shut down Toronto Consulate, to shut down Vancouver Consulate, and to shut down this Ottawa High Commission office. This is the only way out, and I urge all pro-Khalistan Sikhs to join hands and stop these extortions and stop these assassination plots in Canada.
So, again, doesn't actually provide any evidence, but in the context of what we do know, it is quite likely that this is the case. Now, Patnaik himself, the Indian High Commissioner in Canada, he's only a recent appointee. He's only been there for a few months, so it's unlikely that. And again, there's no timings actually offered in his accusation. We don't know when this attempt to hire a hitman actually occurred. If it did occur in recent months, then yeah, Patnaik would have known about it. But if it happened before that, obviously he might not have known about it. But ultimately, again, the argument here is it's an appeal to the Canadian government. Look, you're talking about trade deals, and likewise the US government. You're talking about trade deals with this country who you know, and again we all know, are operating to hire hitmen to kill Khalistani campaigners on North American soil. Now, we do know also, and again, this accusation is quite likely to be true because, again, we do know that India, particularly the Research and Analysis Wing and the NIA of India, the intelligence agencies of India, do use their consulate infrastructure to undertake their operations as a launching platform for their operations. So it is likely that if this is true, that it was launched via a consulate. Now, it's unlikely those consulates are going to be shut down. But ultimately, the whole purpose of this video is firstly, it's obviously to highlight to the wider public what is going on, what India are up to. But it's also a bit of a deterrent attempt. It's a preemptive attack on India and as a deterrent. Say, look, we know what you're up to. Don't do it because we've warned everybody what you're up to. So again, it's an attempt not just to highlight what's going on, but also to try and protect people like Inderjit Singh Gosal, who he believes is the target of this latest assassination attempt. So there you go, James. Quite an explosive and shocking story.
Absolutely, and it has taken up traction, especially within, surprisingly, the Hindutva-based media, but also other international media sources are calling it out. But again, everybody is saying the same thing as you, Angus, is that there is no definitive evidence out there that has been released or that is publicly available. So again, these accusations are there, and we'll have to watch and see if further evidence is actually released in any of the dossiers that are still being held back with different indictment applications in the US, or there's still several cases going through the Canadian court system that allegedly have some links to the government of India, the RSS, RAW, and so forth. So again, that information doesn't generally get released till after trials. So we'll watch and see if any information regarding Mr. Gosal shows up in any of these cases that are working themselves through the courts.
Yeah, and it's been very easy for India to rebuff these accusations because they say, well, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? All the critics say, oh, where's the evidence? Which, of course, is to his disadvantage, Mr. Punin's disadvantage. But in reality, as we say, in the context of, we know that even Mr. Punin himself is currently the subject of a legal case where indeed even the Indian government are implicated in an assassination plot attempt against his own life via hitmen in the US. So again, all the circumstantial evidence and the evidence of the public domain does point to the fact that his accusations are probably true. And as you say, James, it is likely this evidence is being withheld from the public domain because it is an ongoing investigation. So ultimately, on the face of it, it's very easy to rebuff it. Where's your evidence? But in reality, those who follow these cases know it's actually probably true. So anyway, now talking about Hindutva, James.
Just one interesting point there, Angus. Sorry to cut you off there. Just one interesting point, though, is that if the Indian High Commission was to file a defamation or any type of lawsuit against Mr. Panoon for this, then he would actually get them under deposition and be able to get some answers out of them on other cases. So it's a very interesting game to watch because there could be a different methodology or tactic that's at play here.
Indeed, he is a lawyer, so he knows how to play the game. And we do know actually some of the cases that he has taken, it has been for that very reason, is to force evidence out to be released to his side, so he can get sight of all the evidence. Now, talking about Hindutva, James, I'm going to talk about this gentleman here in the UK. This is a guy that we've talked about in the past. He's the MP for Harrow East, a chap called Bob Blackman. He is a Tory, that is a Conservative MP, sitting on the right of centre party, the Conservative Party. Now, Bob Blackman, he's quite a character, this guy. Let me, just to remind our audience about what sort of guy he is. These are some things that he has said in our Parliament here in the UK.
Yesterday, the External Affairs Minister from India, Sri Rankar, was attacked when he was leaving a public venue when he'd been addressing an audience of Indian people in this country. He was attacked by Khalistani thugs. This is against the Geneva Convention, and it appears that the police and the security forces failed to ensure that he was made safe. Now, this is an affront to democracy. It's an affront to our friends and allies in India, and we need to make sure that it doesn't happen again. So will the leader ensure that the Home Secretary or an appropriate minister makes a statement to this House about what protection we're going to make sure when we have external visitors to this country that they are safe?
I'm really sorry.
Etc., etc. So basically what he actually said is that this was a peaceful demonstration against when Jai Shankar visited the country. It was a peaceful demonstration by Khalistani campaigners, but he says they attacked him. He referred to them as Khalistani thugs. And he said it's against the Geneva Convention. No, it's not. I think you'll find it's actually a peaceful democratic process. There's nothing to do with the Geneva Convention there. And he also said it is an affront to democracy. No, it's not. This is actually democracy in action, which clearly he doesn't understand the dynamics of the situation. And here's something even worse that he said in the British Parliament.
The clear position here is that Khalistani militants were operating across the world. Canada, United States, and Australia had similar attacks over the weekend. So we are harbouring Khalistani terrorists in this country right now. So can we have a debate in government time on what action we can take to ensure these terrorists are held to account and banned in this country?
Khalistani terrorists, indeed. We are protecting Khalistani terrorists, apparently, in this country. And yet I don't see any action by the police to arrest Khalistani terrorists. There are no Khalistani terrorists, etc., etc. In other words, we all know the truth of this. But basically, this guy is quite happy to stand up in Parliament, and he's clearly being either paid or promoted by Hindutva forces to come out with this absolute nonsense. And he on every opportunity, he comes out with an attack on the Khalistan movement. So again, clearly, he's just another mouthpiece of Hindutva. So imagine my surprise then when I came across just to support that whole situation about Blackman. Just to remind ourselves, even the Sikh Federation in January this year talked about this guy and reminded everybody that he was the only MP on all sides to accuse Jaggi of being a terrorist. Even this is the time when Boris Johnson, when he was Prime Minister and his leader, had already accepted Jaggi had been actually tortured and been held in arbitrary detention. So in other words, Bob Blackman's attitude went against the whole of the House of Parliament on both sides. He was the only person to stand up and say Jaggi was a terrorist. So again, if you want to understand the credentials of Bob Blackman, It's very clear. He's just a mouthpiece of Hindutva, where everybody else who knows the situation knows, for example, Jaggi is not a terrorist, know that the Khalistan campaign is a peaceful democratic protest. They are not terrorists. He is the lone voice of Hindutva in the British Parliament. So, as I said, imagine my surprise then when I came across this. A chap, or somebody called Karanji Gabba, who was part of the Khalsa Diwan Afghanistan's historic celebration in the United Kingdom Parliament to honour Guru Nanak Dev Ji's Gurpurab. This was held in the Parliament. This chap, Karanji Gabba, was present at this gathering, and he posted up on social media. And this person is a fashion model represented worldwide, so whoever, it doesn't matter. But the point is, the photos he posted up, and let me show you some of these photos. There's the gathering. United Sikhs were there. A lot of people from the Sikh community were there. And look who else was there. Bob Blackman. And even more disturbing, Tan Desai, a Sikh MP, sitting at the same table as Bob Blackman. And, well, lots of comments followed this, but I'll leave it to M. Singh just to sort of sum up the feelings. Again, this was aimed at the person who originally posted this up. Do you realise that one of your Afghan-British cousins, a guy called Inderpal Singh Gabba, is currently, in fact he's not, he's actually out on bail, but he was arbitrarily detained in India and basically alleged to have attacked an Indian embassy. Again, very reminiscent of Avtar Singh Kandar, same story. And yet you're happy to sit at the same table as Bob Blackman, this guy who repeatedly spewed misinformation from India, etc., etc. So, James, unfortunately, we're not members of the Sikh community, so it is very hard for us to judge, other than to be observers from the outside. But I have to say, and I'm very interested in our audience's opinion of this, I think I can predict it, but I am astonished that groups like United Sikhs in the UK can invite this guy, Bob Blackman, who has spewed complete and utter lies and anti-Khalistan Hindutva propaganda in the House of British Parliament, that you've invited to one of your events. I am surprised and a little bit disappointed in Tan Desai, a Sikh MP elected to represent certainly the Sikh community, his own Sikh community, amongst obviously other people in his community. But a Sikh MP sits alongside this Hindutva mouthpiece. What on earth is going on, James?
Well, you know what they say, Angus, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And this may be the case of them trying to, extend an olive branch to try to educate them. But again, there's so much education needed. I can't believe that after he spews so much garbage that you can still pull it up and show that he's playing both sides of the fence here. And there's no doubt in my mind that this was, attended by Blackman just for the political favor, just for the political points that he was going to get with the community, hoping that they weren't aware of the other straight out lies and misinformation that he spews in the Parliament.
Yeah, it's political opportunism, and again, it's very typical of a Tory MP. His smug face, and it's hard not to get a little bit personal about this because I find the guy quite offensive.
Right.
And I used to be a Tory voter. There's people now I'm right of centre, but certainly I could never vote for a guy like this who's quite prepared to sacrifice his principles for whatever it is he's getting in return and spout this complete nonsense, this misinformation. He has become, as I say, he's just a useful idiot for Hindutva. He's spouting this misinformation about the Khalistan campaign. He's clearly he knows full well what is a genuine affront to democracy, to use his own words. It's certainly not the Khalistan movement that are peacefully protesting. It is certainly his actions that I find a complete affront to democracy, where he's quite happy to stand up in our House of Parliament and spew lies and misinformation. Basically that in itself is immoral and breaches pretty much every parliamentary regulation. But anyway, as I say, he's just a typical Tory politician, quite happy to be opportunistic and grab any opportunity he can to try and further his own career. So anyway, there you go. Well, let's leave it at that. And I'm interested in our audience's opinion on Mr. Bob Blackman, but certainly on the United Sikhs for inviting this guy to one of their events, and the feelings about Tan Desai, again, who I referred to just the other day, who has proved a bit of a disappointment, I have to say, certainly on the Jaggi side. He's been very, very quiet about Jagtar Singh Johal, And certainly to sit at the same table as Bob Blackman, I just find, I just shake my head in astonishment, actually. But again, maybe there's a reason that maybe our audience can advise us why we shouldn't be so shocked and horrified by this situation. Anyway, James, let's move on to our comments column. Thank you to our audience for some really interesting comments this time. Mahender has been very active, actually. Thank you, Mahender, for your comments. And you do feature again a little bit further down the line in Critics Corner, as indeed you have in the past. But this comment didn't make Critics Corner because it is actually quite a genuine comment. And I think it's an interesting one. You say, look, there was no Sikhism before 1469. Do you think Sikhism is a man-made religion? Because, of course, you refer to other religions, like, I guess, Christianity, like Islam, that have, Christianity have, of course, the Son of God. Muhammad is the prophet of Allah, etc., etc. But I think your argument is saying, look, Sikhi isn't like that. Sikhi is basically is the first guru who took a bit of Hinduism, a bit of Islam, cobbled it together to create what you say is a man-made religion. And you ask, well, what are your thoughts on this? As you say, Sikhism is a hyper-religion. It's a hybrid religion of both Islam and Sanatana Dharma. Yeah, to some degree, yes, you are absolutely right. But what I would say again, this is a very personal perspective. Everybody has their own opinions and perspectives on this whole sort of subject, but I'll give you mine, is that all religions, at the end of the day, are man-made. There is no, despite all the sort of the miracles or whatever that we all claim, ultimately there is no, and I hate to say this, there is no actual, irrefutable, unambiguous proof of the existence of God other than the wonderful world that we sit around. So as a result of that, humanity over the millennia have created religions to explain our existence. And, and this is no disrespect to any people of any religions. We have all created religion just to give us meaning for life. So ultimately, to answer your question, all religions are man-made, whether you claim to be the Son of God, whether you claim to be the prophet of Allah or whatever, they're all ultimately man-made. So I think to pick up on Sikhism, saying it's man-made, it is like every other religion, but also Sikhi was, it did take different parts of different religions and put them together into one combined religion, because ultimately all the parts that were taken align with normal human moral values. All religions, actually, most religions have a very similar theme. If you look at every religion, they all are based on basic human morality. They're just different interpretations of it. And that essentially is what Sikhism. So the same can be applied to Hinduism, the same can be applied to Christianity, and indeed to Islam. It doesn't matter who got there first. Ultimately, they are all aligned to the same. In other words, it wasn't a race. And you could actually turn this around their head and say, actually, Sikhism, because it's a relatively young religion in relation to the others, actually, it's more modernized, it's actually more relevant because it was thought up more recently when humanity was a little bit more evolved. But again, that's another argument. But there you go, James. It's a whole rabbit hole we could rabbit on for hours about.
And we won't go down that rabbit hole on my side of the world tonight, because I will not stop until the new year dawns. But but at the end of the day, I think that when I look at Sikhi, I think they took the best of a lot of different things to bring into and to embrace, such as selfless service, such as equality, such as standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. I mean, they essentially brought the best of everything together to serve humanity as a whole, and to serve humanity regardless of race, regardless of other religious faiths that people follow, and to make the world better through making the people better. And again, whether it's religion, whether it is anything else, the first thing that you as a human being need to do is believe in yourself. If you can believe in yourself, and through the assistance of the need of belonging, the need of acceptance, that's where I think that organized religion comes in and gives people a safe place to gather, a place to be accepted, a place to feel wanted, and it fits that human need. But I think at the end of the day, you have to start by believing in yourself. when you do that, then you can bring positivity to others around you.
And again, I'm trying not to get drawn into this rabbit hole, but certainly from, again, a completely religiously impartial position that I hold, I have always seen organised religion as a means of control. It's the 1 in 10s I often refer to. It's those people in our society who are genetically driven to need to control their fellow human beings. Religion has been created historically as a tool, as part of that control. Christianity is a prime example of that. Islam, to some degree, is part of that. And certainly when we look at Sikh, I have to say Sikh is probably the only religion I can think of that I'm familiar with that actually goes against that whole concept. It is, I have to say, one of the more inspirational religions. It is, and it's no coincidence, James, that we reported a while ago that when the question was asked of AI, which religion would best serve humanity if there was only one religion on the planet, it came up with the one answer, James, of Sikh, didn't it?
Absolutely, because in that world, it's about being selfless to the physical world around you and material needs, but selfless because you stand up for everyone else around you. And that's what's so important. When you look in the mirror at the end of the day, can you be proud of what's looking back at you? And regardless, I mean, I do not begrudge anybody for any religion. I think that religion can be a great thing for people. But again, believe in yourself first and then take the steps to better yourself. And if that includes religion in your heart, your mind, and your life, then so be it. But again, it's interesting to see the opinions.
Yeah, thank you, Mahender, for that comment. That was actually, I have to say, a really fascinating comment that, again, we could have a whole show on that discussion. It's a really interesting one. JD, now here's a bit of a familiar story that we sometimes have from some of our critics. JD says, I've just been to Punjab recently and asked many people about Khalistan, and guess what the reaction was? They laugh, and hardly anyone cares or thinks about Khalistan. I mean, nobody wants Khalistan in Punjab. Well, is this true? And of course, we do get one or two people who do say this. Well, Gurpurab comes back and says, look, now that you've asked people in Punjab, again, an argument we often say, well, okay, well, let's hold a referendum. If the Narendra Modi government and the BJP are so convinced, as you are, JD, that there is no pro-Khalistan movement in Punjab, or it's so peripheral, so fringe, so small, then let's hold the referendum, because it will kill it overnight. It will kill it stone dead, and it will never be raised again. It just gets rid of that problem overnight, if you think that's true. And Sunnyside actually comes back with, well, I think the more realistic answer is, look, Punjabis regularly elect pro-Khalistan politicians. Amritpal Singh, for example, the most famous pro-Khalistan advocate, is literally an elected MP. Yes, indeed, Amritpal Singh was elected with a 200,000 majority in his constituency. Again, it was an unprecedented record majority in his own constituency, standing on a pro-Khalistan ticket. So the evidence on the ground, despite this apocryphal example of somebody saying, well, I asked everybody, nobody was interested. Yeah, unfortunately, the evidence when it comes to the ballot box actually says that is not the case. The evidence, certainly, obviously in the diaspora, we know it's pro-Khalistan, but in Punjab itself, the evidence when it actually comes to the election box is that the Punjab is very much pro-Khalistan. So, James, same old argument.
Absolutely. I mean, go back to the Wild West, Angus, and ask the man hanging from the noose for stealing bread if he's still hungry and wants more bread. He's going to obviously say no. I mean, come on now. When you are at risk of persecution for saying yes, of course you're going to find those people that are worried about speaking out in public. Plain and simple.
But
and
also,
it's what India does.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I think there's also an element here of it's very typical of normal societies, is that most people in society are actually not that politically motivated. They're not politically inclined. They're not even politically interested. They're just indifferent. They've got, bigger things to worry about in their lives, about keeping food on the table and keeping a roof over their heads. They don't care about politics that much. So it is quite likely that many people you did speak to in Punjab don't care about Khalistan. But given the chance to vote on it, which way would they choose? And of course, everybody on the whole has an opinion about subjects when they are pressed to actually, if they are asked to tick a box, yes or no, they will make a decision. So you are up against, and you probably come across normal apathy that human society has. We have it here in the UK about politics. Most people are actually not that interested in politics, but when pressed, they will finally make an answer. So anyway, I would say that. Now, James, moving on to at last Critics Corner, Mahender does make an appearance, and this is a comment he did actually make on the other day, and I didn't cover that one, but he made it again. So I thought, right, okay, Mahender, let's address this one. Now, the first line got you in Critics Corner because this lets you. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. This lets you down, Mahender. You say, don't listen to these two non-Sikhs, white racist fools. Right, for one thing, how on earth can we be racist if we are representing the Sikh community? I mean, that's a paradox in itself, which immediately undermines the whole comment. Yeah. Of course we're not racist, it's silly. We're non-Sikhs because the whole point of this show is perspectives. It is providing two white, with all due respect to us, James, old men, grumpy old men, who want to give our opinions and perspectives from a relatively impartial outside observer's view. In other words, there are lots and lots of Punjabi Sikh channels who talk about your issues in the community, but I think we're the only white channel, middle-aged men talking impartially, or at least out from outside, giving our perspectives on it. So it gives a completely different perspective on many of these issues, and hopefully we think that balances out many of the perspectives within the community. So it is worth, well, we hope it's worth our audience listening to us, because it gives you a different opinion, a slightly different, a less partial opinion on these. Anyway, that's addressing the first line.
Right.
Now, this Mahender says that he is a Punjabi Sikh and he lived peacefully in Punjabi. So the whole comment is about. There's lots of comments in here. We don't have time to go through every single one, but you do say that the Western media spreads misleading information about Punjab, and what you say is that you're happy where you are. You're happy to be under the umbrella of India. You're happy to be protected by India against your enemies. The enemies, of course, that you refer to as Pakistan. Okay, I can't dispute that. And Khalistan, you say death to Khalistan, etc. Long live Israel and India. Now, interesting. Do watch my podcast, which will be uploaded tomorrow, about the links between Israel and India. They're quite concerning. And Israel has provided a lot of technology, particularly surveillance technology, to India to allow India, a rising authoritarian state, to surveil its citizens online. For example, in India now, you are obliged, it's going through the courts at the moment, but you're obliged to download an app to your mobile phone that will spy on every phone call that you make, that will log every phone call you make, every text you send. This is ultimate surveillance. This is stuff from George Orwell's 1984. This is the Indian state that you, Mahender, are welcoming to protect you. Now, sadly, you are a prime example of the average Indian who has been completely conditioned to accept India's authoritarian rule and control over your life. You see it, as the great protector against our enemies. You should read, can I ask you, Mahender, if you have never read it, please read George Orwell's 1984. That has become almost a blueprint for modern day authoritarian regimes. We're seeing it sadly creeping here in the West. It was written, I think, in the 1940s. It's a fabulous piece of writing that completely analyses how a state controls, in a dystopian future, a society. And many of those elements are present in present-day India. They're creeping in here in the West. But Mahender, sadly, I think it's very sad to read your comment, because you have been completely conditioned by the Govt media, for example, to make you feel inured. You feel protected by the very jail cell that is imprisoning you, James.
Absolutely. And I mean, if that's where he feels comfort, if that's where he feels safe and happy and, successful in whatever that means to him, then all the power to him. But I think that, as you said, I think that the blinders have been pulled down over his eyes, and he is happy to live in the dark there. And that's my opinion. But again, if it works for him, then so be it. And I'm not here to judge or to try to change his train of thought. Just hopefully that he is open to learning new perspectives.
I think the only metaphor I think that is appropriate here is Mahender is a sheep in a pen, being protected by his shepherd. And we all know what happens to sheep in the end, or certainly the lambs. So, but I put Stay Safe's comment here because this, although Stay Safe doesn't belong in Critics Corner, his Stay Safe's comment was very relevant, and I think this answers Mahender's comment really quite beautifully in the same vein. It's 79 years since the Empire, the British, left India. All India did was put a band-aid fix on the colonial rule. So the point being made here, and the point really to address to Mahenda, is you do realise that when the British left, they basically handed colonial role and colonial control over to the Brahmins, the upper caste elite that are now controlling your lives under a colonial rule. And even in Punjab, you are under colonial rule of the Indian elite in Delhi, mate. I'm sorry to shatter your worldview. But anyway, final set starts off with Gurpurab. Thank you, Gurpurab, who's been very active in our comments recently. There were 13 comments I see got deleted. I'm sure if we can't see them. No, we can't, sadly, James, as we do know, comments do magically disappear, don't they?
And exactly, and they disappear almost as quick again, Angus, back to that donut theory. Put a dozen donuts on my desk. It's amazing how quickly they'll disappear.
Absolutely. Sam Singh says, freedom is a God-given right of every individual. Absolutely it is. That is what we stand for, is to protect the freedoms. And again, these are the freedoms that Mahenda sadly doesn't realise have been removed from Mahenda's life. Right. So it is a God-given right. Never give them up easily. Never give them up with a fight, which is exactly what the Sikh stands for. Sukhwant, again referring to India, the Indian terror camp, as you call it, their methodology, drugs, genocides, assassination, fake news, they're all used by organised crime. So what is the only solution, James? Mastan Singh Dhillai comes up with it. It is, of course, a free Khalistan. The key word there being free.
Absolutely, and when Khalistan becomes a sovereign state, then I think there's going to be a lot of change in the world, especially in that region when they see how successful it can be by equal representation and equality of all. So.
Indeed, and we'll leave the final sign-off to Jaskarat Singh and Jiwahe Guruji with the explosive Sat Sri Akal and Gurmeet Singh, the Khalistan Zindabad. Waheguru Ji Chadi Kala, Khalistan Zindabad. Always a great sign-off, and a great sign-off for the week, James.
Absolutely, and we hope everyone has enjoyed this week and will join us again next week. But here's your homework for the weekend, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share with others. Let's try to get those numbers up before the end of the year for our subscriber base. Please and thank you.
Absolutely. Please do help spread our existence to the rest of the world. We need to get those numbers up. But thanks so much in the meantime to everybody. Thanks for all your comments. There have been loads of wonderful comments and I'd say some particularly interesting ones. Thank you for those. Don't forget you can message us directly at message at satlugetv.com if there's anything you want to address to James and myself directly, as many of you have indeed been doing so. Thank you for that. Don't forget the podcast being uploaded tomorrow, a fascinating one, and an interesting link to Jeffrey Epstein, in fact quite a shocking link about a nexus of right-wing extremists between Epstein, India and Israel, and indeed extremists on the MAGA front. It's a fascinating podcast, and Dr. Graywell displays an awful lot of very interesting evidence, which again is lifting the lid on what goes on behind the scenes of our politics. But anyway, in the meantime, thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next week.